Alright, okay, good evening everyone. Hey, welcome to the new week. So, as usual, I'll run through the markets over here, highlight some of the opportunities available. Okay, and some of the things to note as well, right? And of course, if you guys have any questions, um, feel free to put it into the chat. I'll be looking at them and answer as many questions as we can for today's session as well, okay? So, let's get started with the dollar index. Right, last week Friday we did had the NFP coming in, and of course we have the dollar actually weakens quite a bit. We have the yen pairs moving lower as well, which means the yen is strengthening. Okay, a little bit of a unfortunate part because we do have some of the yen pairs that we were looking to trade last week as well, right? I'll touch on that as we progress, right? And we'll talk about those as well as in terms of like trade review. Okay, so what we had last Friday was pretty much some impulsive move in the market, not only from the dollar perspective but also on the yen perspective. Okay, we did get those impulsive move. So if you take a look at dollar index over here, right, you can see this big candle, this momentum move was actually from Friday. NFP release. To be honest, I wasn't expecting such a big move, but I was expecting the dollar to actually pull back, right? So a very simple expectation is whenever the market actually made a significant move in one direction, oftentimes we just want to be expecting some sort of a pullback, right? So obviously the pullback can come in, generally two mode. One is an impulsive pullback, where market just did what it did on Friday, or it can actually pull back correctively, right? Which means it generally takes a longer time for the pullback to happen. So what we had last Friday was a impulsive drop, right? So this is kind of like a V-shaped formation. And oftentimes after we see a V-shaped formation, we would like to be a little bit patient and generally remain neutral, right? The part here in terms of a little bit of the wave expectation is, of course, you can see we have this 1 2 3. Okay, from this peak, this was the very first impulsive drop. Okay, so from Elliott wave perspective, oftentimes when we only have one impulsive drop, if the market can give us a corrective pullback from here, we will expect one more drop, right, to complete a three wave set, right? And of course that three wave here can just test the 618, and generally the overall structure is still gonna be bullish if you look at it from that perspective. Okay, so what I'm looking at for this week here in terms of the dollar index is that if the market were to pull back correctively, right, obviously you have like in SMC there's the huge fair value gap area. If the market can pull back correctively, this would open up an opportunity for us to look to sell the dollar this week. Okay, and of course, with some fit ratios here, the target we can look at in expectation here is somewhere around 98.30. Right? So that gives us an overview in terms of like what are some of the major pairs that we can potentially look up for within the week, right? In terms of like trade opportunities. Okay. So if you go over to Euro, right, kind of inverse of that, right, where we have this 1 2 3, and then of course we have this V-shaped formation. Again, if the market pulls back correctively, that would open up an opportunity to look to trade it short term back to the upside, right? And then that would complete that three wave, and then we can look to sell it after which. Okay. So same thing here. If you take a look at this here on the lower time frame perspective, right? In terms of like 4 hour, we have this, right? So we expect if the market pulls back correctively, we can look for one more upside. That's what I call a directional bias, right? At least for the short term in this week, the directional bias is if you can get a pullback, we'll look for the buy, right? But of course, the pullback, the prerequisite is you do not want this pullback to just come down fast, right? You want this pullback to really take its time and develop as a correction, right? Now, in conjunction to that, if we can get that, right, and then on the lower time frame, you can start to see that we have our model set up, right? So on the lower time frame on the H1, you can already see this is essentially a liquidity pool where the market actually took out the low, right? And then of course from there the market reverses very quickly. We took out this high, right? We don't only take out that high, we also successfully take out this previous high, right? You can see very huge momentum there. So that builds in the model, right? The setup that we're always looking at, and of course this entire leg here creates a huge value gap, which we do not want to just put that in because it's just gonna clutter the chart. But you can see, right, it's a very obvious value gap, market imbalance. Okay, now the part here I did not put in a order as of today is because this morning as we're looking at the chart, it was just somewhere here, right? And of course these are all after which, okay, so in the morning it was just somewhere here. It's just a little bit too early to put in pending order, okay, because again, as I said, the prerequisite on this is essentially we want to see the market pulls back slowly, right? You don't want this to come down fast. So from that expectation, again, we are aware that the market would need time to develop, right? So there's no need for us to rush things through. Okay, so going forward, if this is just going to continue to consolidate and slowly pull back like this tonight, going into tomorrow morning, I would be very interested to see if we can look to take a trade here. Okay, again, a short-term trade for the week, and of course the expectation is just simply a three-wave development that looks something like that. Right, so that's something on the euro dollar we can definitely pay attention on. Okay, then we have the GBP USD pair, right? Very similar expectation. We have the market coming down very impulsively. Of course, we had some sort of a bounce here. So again, if we can get this corrective pullback, we can expect one more push up, right, towards some areas of this, and then we'll continue to expect downside from there, right? So short term this week, this is the opportunity we can focus on. Okay, so same thing here, right? If you go down to the lower time frame on the pound dollar, there is the opportunity that we can look to take it, right? Again, just do a slight adjustment on that. Okay, yeah, you can see, right, market took out that low, but then very quickly reverses with momentum, taking out that high as well, leaving behind that market imbalance value gap, right? So if you can get a pullback here, we can potentially look to trade it to the upside. And of course this would just print a simple 1, 2, 3, right? And that's all we're looking to trade. Okay, so GBP and the euro, okay, just bear in mind that they are correlated in a way, right? Which means that if you're gonna look to execute both of this trade, you want to factor in your risk exposure, okay? Because likelihood of one trade not working out, the second trade would likely also not work out, right? So that's what I meant by market correlated. Obviously, if both work, like if you take both and they start to do in our direction, then obviously you can double your returns, double your profits, because you kind of like exposing yourself to 2 times, right? Yeah, so just bear that in mind if you're looking to trade euro dollar and pound dollar at the same time. Your risk exposure is important. Alright, so that's on the 2 pairs. Okay, then we also have the dollar, Aussie dollar. Okay, now to me, Aussie dollar had some sort of a similar pattern here. You can see we took out that low, we took out that high. Potentially this can go higher here short term. But in comparison to the euro and the pound, I'm just not as confident and convicted on the Aussie dollar. Because the Aussie dollar, you can see the quick difference here is, of course, you can see this gap. I would say the fair value gap, right, hasn't really been fully tested. Same thing here in the euro, right? Euro is very obvious, haven't been fully tested. But the Aussie dollar has actually tested. Okay, you can see this week, right? It has tested that fair value gap. And of course, I'm also looking the part where if I'm looking to trade the euro and the pound dollar, I wouldn't want to overexpose again on the third pair that can be correlated, right? Because we are looking at essentially trading the dollar, right? So for that very reason, while the expectation of Aussie dollar remains more or less the same as the other major pairs, I would personally not put too much emphasis and focus on the Aussie side, right? I'll be more inclined to focus on the euro as well as the pound. Okay, but the overall analysis here, short term for Aussie, is still potentially upside for the week. Okay. Then we have the dollar Canadian, right? So if the dollar is likely going to weaken, then dollar Canadian here, we're looking at short-term downside, right? So if you take a look at this chart here, we do have a big three-wave completion potentially, right? And of course, we did expect the pullback, right? Since last week, because again, after the market gave us some sort of a move like that, we often expect some sort of a pullback, even if the market were to continue its trend. Okay. So going forward this week, if we can get some sort of a corrective pullback, we can expect one more drop, right? And that will complete that three-wave minimum expectation towards 50 and 618 zone, right? So that's where your FIB key ratios are. Okay. So dollar Canadian, something to have it in your watch list as well. Again, we have this as an opportunity trade setup. Right, we have this as a crawl. You can see, of course, these are all, you know, liquidity sweeps, right, where the market breaks the top and then just one massive candle moving lower, leaving behind, of course, that feather gap, and of course taking out all these lows, right? So yeah, the setup is there. Again, we just need the market to pull back correctively, and that would give us an opportunity to look to sell it. Okay, so again, you can see that is actually red flag. I'm actually paying attention on those. Okay, dollar yen. Okay, dollar yen over here came very close and very nicely, just tagged 100%. Didn't really complete the top of the channel, right, of this channel. But again, you can see that, again, that's a parallel channel, right? The market doesn't always need to do that. Okay, but what we have is a very, very nice little 1:1 equal leg over here. You can see, right? Basically, I'm taking measurement from here to here, map it towards this area. That's your W, X, and Y, right? Equal leg. And the market kind of gave us that very nice little reaction from there. Okay, so dollar yen here, the expectation for this week, okay, the bias for this week is to expect price to continue to move lower. Okay, now it might be a little bit early to kind of map out the FIB right now, because if the market just comes lower like this, you need to readjust that FIB. But just taking into consideration, if let's say this is the low and the market starts to pull back, you know, this is the area that we can expect the price to come back towards. And this week, we are likely going to look for a short-term sell. Okay, so as long as price stays below this invalidation level at 150.90, any corrective pullback can be seen as an opportunity to sell, and then your target is just generally going to be at the bottom of the trend line. Okay, so that's on the dollar yen side of things. Moving forward, you know, maybe going into Wednesday or even Thursday, if the market develops as what we expect, we may have a sell setup that we can look to execute. Right, so that's on the dollar yen. Then we have gold. Okay, so gold currently is testing the 50 and 618 region. Okay, to be honest, I would suggest to be a little bit patient and neutral on that. You know, you don't want to just sell the instrument. You don't want to just sell gold simply because it's hitting the 50% mark or hitting the 618, right? The key areas are important, but how the market moves towards the key area, how the market reacts of the key area, there are clues that we need to also consider. Okay. So the expectation on this is, of course, if the market were to give us a decent rejection down, right, maybe on the lower time frame, you can start to see an impulsive move and then followed by a corrective development. Definitely we're going to be looking to sell this down, right? And then the expectation would be this is a W, X, and then Y, right? But the prerequisite here is that the market needs to some sort give us some confirmation that it wants to start going lower. Okay, because if it doesn't, then you don't want to be selling it, right? Because the momentum here is pretty strong. Okay, now you don't want to be buying it immediately as well, right? Because as I mentioned, if this comes out impulsively, this will be a V-shaped formation. You wait for the sell, right? Because that's the bias, that's the direction. Okay, so give it a little bit of time. On gold, right? Observe for maybe today and tomorrow how price is going to react off this POI, this point of interest, this key area. Then we're going to make a decision from there on. Okay. Now silver is a little bit different. Silver has a little bit of clarity because I think silver here, the price pullback is not as sharp as compared to gold, right? So it kind of gives us the perspective where, again, if I draw this in, this is basically your fake break, right? Liquidity sweep, market reverses and take out that. If we can get a three-way simple pullback, this is a point of interest for us to look to sell. Okay, so silver here, I would say going forward this week, if we can get that continuation towards the zone at 37.80, 38.30, that will be an area that we can consider look out for sell setup. Okay, it might take time, closer towards the end of the week, that's where the setup might come. Okay, so that's on silver. Crude oil, okay, we are going to be maintaining an expectation where the price is likely going to continue to move lower towards where that previous swing low here is. Okay, now this one here, it might take a little bit of time for it pullback to develop. Okay, if we can get that pullback here, we can look to sell. Okay, if we don't get the pullback in the market, just continue to drop like that, there's no trade. Okay, and then what you want to then look out for is when the market takes out this low, how is it gonna react, right? That's the key. If it's gonna give you a V, then you start to look for the bounce back up. Okay, if it breaks through entirely and just gives you some sort of a correction, you continue to look for downside. Okay, so the one key thing to take away from today's session, you can observe that it's a little bit repetitive, is basically observing how price reacts at the key level. Okay, so the crucial aspect is the point of interest, right? When price is reaching a certain key level, you ask yourself this question: how is it developing towards this area, and when it tags the area, how is it reacting of it? Because those information will give you clue in terms of which direction you want to be focusing on, right? What can you expect from the market moving forward from there, from a high probability perspective? Okay, so this is my take on crude oil. If you can get a corrective pullback, we'll look to sell this week. If not, we just continue to just observe, right? Then we have S&P. Okay, now S&P came pretty close. Depending on how strict you are, you can say that it has tagged that low area. Okay, very impulsive move against something that we have expected, in terms of the market would pull back. It's just the magnitude and the volatility of the pullback is not something that we anticipated it to be so impulsive, right? We expect it to pull back anyway, right? Again, generally, that's how the market is developing, right? We have this push up, it will tend to pull back before the continuation. So what can I expect from S&P now, right? This is definitely impulsive, right? If you guys zoom into the details of things, we have this breaking the high, we have of course this low gets taken out. You can say this is a double top, this is a neckline on the lower time frame, and then this is definitely impulsive. If we can get a corrective pullback, we can expect one more push down, okay, to give us again some sort of a three-wave move. And then of course with some confluences, you can take from this swing low to that swing high, somewhere around that 50% mark would be a key area that you can look to buy it back. Okay, so when the market gives us an impulsive leg, like what happened on Friday, oftentimes they give us opportunities, but not immediately, right? So Friday, when that impulsive move kicks in, immediately, we know what to look out for, right? We give it another 2 days, today and maybe tomorrow. If the market is going to pull back correctively, that is an opportunity. Okay, that is where your setup will start to build. Okay, so that's on the S&P take, right? Very, very straightforward, very simple, right? If you get a corrective pullback, we expect one more drop, look for the sell, right? If you don't get that, then that's nothing, right? We'll just wait out. Okay, again, that's part of like what we call having a trade plan, right? You're clear in terms of like what are the conditions, what are the criteria you want to see. If the market doesn't give you that, that's no trade. If the market develops according to your expectation in terms of like what you want to see, what you plan to see, then that's where your execution comes in, right? That's where your trade setup comes in, right? So that's on the S&P. And then moving into the yen pairs, right? Okay, so yen pairs over here, for GBP, JPY, very unfortunate. We had a buy trade last week that got hit our stop. Again, that's the emphasis of why stop loss is important, because if price doesn't move in your favor, you want to get out quick. You want to cut your losses short, right? So the trade that we're looking at was basically very simple. We had this push up. We're looking at price coming down. As long as this low is being respected, we expect pushback to the top, right? Very simple trade idea. But of course, you can see that the yen strengthened quite a bit, and of course pound yen just dipped and break below that, right? That's where we got up. Okay. To be honest, it's not something that, looking at the trade as a review, right? All things are checked, right? If you ask me, moving forward, if there's another opportunity like that, similar one, maybe not exactly on this pair, is there anything wrong about that setup? No, right? You just have to accept the fact that it's not going to be 100% obviously, right? And of course there are some factors considering that, okay, the trade is on Friday, there's an NFP news that came out with it. Okay, maybe that's one factor that we can avoid, right? I mean, if there's a high impact news, maybe we want to look out for how price is going to react off the news before taking any trades, right? So those are some minor adjustments that we can do, but in terms of like the setup conditions itself, it fulfills everything. Okay, so it's just basically one of the many trades that just didn't work out itself, right? So what's next on pound yen? Okay, so we are likely gonna give it some time and see how it gonna react off this zone, right? I mean, it came down, it tagged this, and then right now it's just kind of reacting off that. Okay, we really want to see how the market is gonna react off that. But if I zoom out a little bit, you can see that we are still kind of lacking some sort of a pullback, right? If you take a look from this low here, there weren't any very significant pullback. Okay, we do have like minor pullback here and there, but if you take a look from this entire leg itself, can this be a significant pullback, right? Maybe somewhere towards the 50% mark, which is going to be there. Very possible, right? So if you start to look from it at a higher time frame or zoom out picture, this means that if this is going to be corrective, we can capitalize on this, right? But of course, there's that given if then process, right? So what's the prerequisite for that to look out for a sell is really price has to maybe really come down a little bit more and then start to give us that corrective pullback. Okay, again, if you take a look at this here, we had price taking out this high, price taking out this low. We have that momentum candle. If we can get a corrective move, that is something we can definitely consider to sell. Okay, so I'll keep a lookout on this moving forward. From here on, if there's something, then obviously we just put it out, right? Okay, then we have odd yen. Odd yen here, I'm still maintaining this view. Okay, but obviously we need to be adaptive according to what's gonna happen next, right? So as of now, I'm just keeping a simple view where this can still be a simple WXY, right? If the market can form a V-shaped bounce here, right? In fact, I'll just put this here as well for everyone reference. If we can get a V-shaped bounce here, then we can expect this is a WXY, this is the low. We can look to buy it up. All right. But if we don't get a V-shape, that's where we need to reassess, okay, the analysis itself, right? So that's what I meant. You want to be adaptive. Okay. So again, right now it's a little bit tough to really share with you what to look out for because we need to see if the market can give us what we want. Okay. If the market doesn't give us what we want and this just continue to move lower with momentum, right? Basically, this is one leg. that would shift things a little bit, right? Because now I need to zoom out a little bit more and potentially expect where the market can then do something like this, right? Or even maybe retest this low before the bounce, right? So it opens up quite a bit of possibility where we need to kind of monitor, on a day-to-day basis, like what's next, right? What's next, what the market is doing. Then we kind of like identify the pattern that we can recognize from those movement, those pattern develops, and make a forecast from there, right? What will be the higher probability pattern? What will be a higher probability direction that the market would likely develop? Okay, so I think the yen pairs in specific, like the pound yen as well as the odd yen, probably need a little bit more time for us to gain clarity. Okay, yeah. Okay, so this two probably just give it a bit patience. Pound Australia is something that I'm putting this aside since like last 2 to 3 weeks. Okay, the reason for that is because this is just not clear, right? The market is essentially just continue to trade within the range. If I zoom out a little bit, okay, it's just basically trading at the bottom of this range. There's no clear breakout. There's nothing clear at the moment, right? Can this be just a simple fake break and then the market just impulsive move to the upside and continue to move higher potentially, right? Can the market start to break down and then start to form something like this, and then maybe a big crawl here, possible as well. But then again, we don't want to be trading within that sort of a consolidation phase, right? The sort of a corrective phase. We don't want to be trading that, right? So the take here is really just leave this aside. Okay, when there's nothing clear on this, we just leave it aside, right? I mean, there are many other things that we can look out for the week anyway. Okay, so pound odd, to keep it simple, we just leave it. Crypto. Okay, now BTC has been coming down, not something again that we did not expect because again every other move will pull back, right? Market seems to be bouncing off the 618, but it's not the most ideal bounce that I would love to see that immediately say, all right, pay attention to this, we're gonna get something. The reason is because this is not really an impulsive bounce. Okay, I mean, if the market give us something like this here, that would be screaming, pay attention, okay? Why? Because you can see this is what I meant by impulsive, right? Like huge candles. But you can see this is like tiny candles, right? It's like struggling to go up. So what this means, right? Is there a possibility this would start to form a crawl here before the move kicks back to the upside? Likelihood. Okay, so what this means again, you'd probably just want to wait it out. Okay, I mean, if this just keeps going higher, it just forms an impulsive leg from here. That means from here, it just suddenly push higher. Perfect as well, right? Because what it means is that this is the V shape, right? And then we'll look out for corrective pullback. We'll look to buy. Okay. Again, am I bearish on Bitcoin right now? No. Okay, I'm just thinking that you probably would like to give it some time for it to complete the correction. Okay, it's a very, very common thing in the market where you get an impulsive lead, you get a correction, you get impulsive lead, you get a correction, right? So, that's also another part where every time we see an impulsive move, okay, you will hear me say, don't buy it when the price is at the top, right? Don't sell it when the price is at the very bottom, right? After an impulsive move, because it tends to pull back. Okay, so Bitcoin here, I think this week, depending on how the market is gonna develop tomorrow or maybe going to Wednesday, we might have something meaningful. Okay, because if we start to see that impulse leg, it can really mean that this is a completed pullback, right? And if that's a completed pullback, means the invalidation level would shift to this low, and we will expect the price to respect this low and make a new high. Okay, yeah, so definitely something to pay attention to for the week, right? In terms of BTC. Good. Okay, so a couple of things to note. Obviously, for the week, I think some of it is in development phase, but opportunities are there, right? I mean, every week there are things that we can look out for. Okay. Yeah, so some of you are mentioned, like Marvin mentioned about gold, Alan mentioned about pound yen. I think we cover that as we progress. Raphael here asks, what's the view on the dollar franc? Dollar franc. Okay. So we can see that this was last week's view. Okay, didn't really come down and tag it, but we just got that bounce up. So what is the take here, right? Very quickly, this one here, I will put it as a simple three-wave move. Okay, and what are the expectation is that we're gonna take essentially this and quick measurement. Okay, the expectation is something like that. Okay, I mean, if you don't expect and forecast too far, then the minimum within the week is you can look out for a short-term sell. Okay, so you have like the range of this top. Okay, and can even take fibs from this high to this low. Okay, now if you zoom down to the lower time frame, right, you have the setup in place. Okay, it's just that this pair is not something that I'm looking at it on a regular basis, but you can see that the setup model is there, right? We have this high taken out, with this low taken out, we have huge momentum candle, right? That will be a nice little confluence to look to sell. Okay, so yeah, you can also see the process that I put in, right? Essentially, we start off with the higher time frame. Okay, essentially the 4 hour to establish the structure, establish what is the direction that we can focus on, right? AKA the directional bias, and then once we have that established, we can go down to the lower time frame and look for criteria of, you know, execution, right? Okay, yeah, so that's on the dollar franc. Okay, Novell asks, what's my view on the Euro Canadian? Let's say, okay, can you move down here? Okay, EuroCAD had a little bit similarity, obviously, with the dollar Canadian. Okay, we kind of took out that low, recently formed a V-shaped bounce. If you can get a corrective pullback for this week, right, I would say you want to focus on the upside, right? Okay, whether this upside here is gonna break this high, I don't see a clear pattern on that, whether or not, right? But I think a very, very conservative target you can look out for is a simple three wave, right? It may just come back and retest, you know, some of the zone here, right? It may not break the top, but it's fine, right? Why I say that? Because if you look at this pullback here and it's just, you know, very, very roughly look to take a trade after the pullback, which is stop just below that swing low. If your target up here, you have your risk reward in place for you. You don't need to go for the home run, right? You don't need to go for like huge upside, right? You just need to go for somewhere conservative. You get your risk reward ratio there. It's good enough. Okay, so this is another one that you can look out for in the lower time frame as well. You know, can have this low break in. You can see, you know, the setups are there. Okay, maybe not the fair value gap, but you know, there's this order block here, right? So if you can get a corrective pullback, that is definitely a nice little trade you can look to, you know, to consider and look to trade it. Okay, so I don't look at all this crosses. Okay, but you do realize that there are opportunities outside of the pairs I'm looking at, right? In fact, some of those are clearer in terms of the opportunities and the setup that as compared to the pairs I'm looking at, right? But I'm just gonna stick to the pairs I'm looking at because, you know, I don't want to be like diverting too much, right? But again, if you are consistently looking at, for example, EuroCAD, you're consistently looking at dollar franc, okay, there are opportunities on those pairs as well. Okay, Aussie New Zealand. Okay, William asked about Aussie New Zealand. This is what we have. Okay, sorry, right? It took a little bit more time for it to come out. But I would overall maintain the view where this would likely still be the case for Aussie Kiwi. Okay, so likely something like this, right? Which still expect downside. Okay. Not a pair that tends to move in a very clear direction. It's a pair that its characteristic itself is pretty corrective in nature, right? Because the market tends to, you can see, oftentimes does a lot of all this ups and downs, right? And then of course, you know, in rare occurrence, you're gonna see something like that, and then it's just gonna go back into its ups and downs, right? So if you're gonna trade Aussie New Zealand, you need to be having a lot of patience. Okay, where the market can basically tag you in, move in your direction, does a pretty deep pullback, and then go back in the direction that you want, and then repeat the whole cycle itself, right? Because that's the characteristics of this pair. Okay, so just bear that in mind if you're trading this, right? Yeah, so my take is this. If you use some fit reference, potentially you can go towards 1.0875. Okay. Yeah, so that's my take on this. Good. Cool. So that's generally what I have for the week. Okay, hopefully today's session is helpful. Oh, I see one more question here. Euro pound, right? Okay, to be honest, I would stay out of Euro pound, right? The view here is what we have is that we have this high, we have this low. Right now, this low here, the market managed to tag all this level and make a pretty impulsive bounce. But that opens up the part where can this be a 1, 2, 3, and then only continuation? Yes. Can this be all it is and then this pulls back here and then starts to break the high? Yes, right? So I mean, there are quite a bit of different possibilities and there isn't something that stands out very clearly. So I would just say, you know, wait until price take out either this high or this low, right? And then that the nature of how price is going to break above that high or low and the pattern that is going to develop from there will give us much more clarity compared to now, right? So this is the similar situation as to the pound odd, right? Okay, where again, you know, price take out some high, take out some low, but it's just not the clearest pattern development, right? So that's why you stay out of it, right? So very same thing here in Euro pound. I would personally just stay out on this. Okay. Good. Yeah, so hopefully today's session give you some plan into what to look out for the week. Okay. All the best moving forward, and I'll see you guys in the next session. Yeah. Good night.